Thank you, Colonel. It's a privilege to be with you this evening, and thank you all for coming. So let's dive straight in. So the theme of your brief presentation is that things are changing, and they're changing at a fast pace. So if we go back in 1996, for instance, to just pick a 10-year interval, what Hezbollah was and the threat that Hezbollah posed to Israel in 1996 was something quite marginal. And then a 2006 war happened, and then all of a sudden we discovered that Hezbollah can actually target Israeli cities with long-range missiles and rockets, and in fact can perform quite ably on the battlefield against the IDF. And now, 10 years later, although we're not at another war yet, but Hezbollah, even in this 10 years of quiet that the 2006 war has brought, has metastasized yet again into something very large, and with the impact of which is going to be, just as in 2006 there was an introduction of a new way of conducting warfare in Lebanon. Now what I understand from your comments is that it's not only the way Israel is going to conduct itself in Lebanon, but also how Hezbollah is going to conduct itself perhaps inside Israel. Can you lead us through these changes, if you will?
Well, Tony, thank you very much. What we see today, if we go through the years and look at 1996, and we talk of Hezbollah, we talk of an organization, basically a religious organization, a Shia organization that is there to fight Israel on its posts within Lebanon, within what we call the security zone. 2006 was an introduction to something else. The war in 2006 is basically criticized by ourselves more than by Hezbollah. Because Hezbollah, and Nasrallah comes out and he says that soon after the war, if he had the ability not to go into war, he wouldn't have gone into war. And he has a reason for that. In 2013, Hezbollah celebrate the last of the infrastructure damaged in the Second Lebanese War. It's a symbol. It shows how much Hezbollah need the people. But we were introduced to about 40,000 rockets at the time. Basically, the rockets were fired towards Haifa, to that vicinity. That was the area.
Right.
But there's been a change, a big change, because the last 6 years, 5 years, Hezbollah has made a strategic change. Actually, it starts at 2010, when Nasrallah comes out and speaks of the plan of conquering the Galil. Right. That is the first introduction we have with Hezbollah's offensive plan. Hezbollah understands that in 2006, he had the privilege of coming out of the bunker, dusting off the dust, and saying, hey, we've won the war. Two things were Hezbollah's symbols. The first was the flotilla shot by a missile, by a C-802.
Right.
The second thing was the Israeli tank, the Merkava Siman Arba, which was hit by anti-tank missiles. But he understands that won't be enough. He understands that the 2006 was an opportunity for him, for Nasrallah, for this organization, and it won't come back. So he makes a change. This strategic change of going on the offensive has become more than just a plan. It's become a real offensive way, a real doctrine by Hezbollah. So what do they do in Syria? Two main lessons learned. First of all, the first lesson is the concentration of effort. If we talk of Hezbollah and we give them maybe a sense of maybe mercy and we call them an organization, it's not an organization. We talk of, in 1996, they fought with 3, 5 soldiers, terrorists. In 2006, basically, they were static. waiting for our soldiers to come.
Right.
In Syria, Hezbollah is fighting with 6,000 and 7,000 soldiers at a time against ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra and different organizations there. It's not 6,000 soldiers of Hezbollah, but Hezbollah is in command of those fightings within Syria. So they've learned that if they concentrate the effort, they can achieve many offensive achievements which they never thought they could do.
So could you give us an example as to, for instance, what kind of attacks of offensives inside Israel that the IDF is concerned about, but also as to their impact, for instance, not just in terms of a symbolic, let's say, incursion into Israel, but let's say, what is actually the capacity of Hezbollah to disrupt or delay or sabotage the Israeli war effort and offensive into Lebanon? I mean, this is in a way uncharted. Well, I don't want to say completely uncharted, but it's very new territory for Israel. Israel's doctrine has been always to be on the offensive. Now, all of a sudden, the offensive is not necessarily always taken for granted. Now, there's a possibility that there could be delays of a couple of days, 3 days, which could be very critical in the time frame of another war. Could you explain that a little bit as well?
So, on Yom Kippur War, Israel was prepared for the Syrians to enter the Golan Heights, more or less prepared. We've had that privilege to leave the defense for many years. Not anymore. So what is Hezbollah planning? They're planning to carry out the conquering of the Galil. Not conquering the Galil, but they're planning to capture a village.
Right.
They're planning to conquer some land. Since 1947, we have not lost a village or land. They're planning to go into Nahariya. They're planning to go into Shlomi, Kiryat Shmona, into the different villages, Metula, to cut off Metula from Israel for 10, 12, 24 hours. That's their plan. But they won't do it only with forces moving forward. That is to say that it's not the only thing that will be done there, or used there. Hezbollah today have over 140,000 rockets. They cover the whole of the state of Israel. Hezbollah have over 100,000 mortars. What do they have there? So what will happen is the following. This is their plan. They will use what they use today in Syria. They have thousands of what we call, or what you can see, what they call barrel bombs. These barrel bombs have the size of a quarter, a half, and a ton of ammunition landing. They're not accurate at all. So where would you fire a barrel bomb like that? You fire a barrel bomb like that into the built-up dense areas,
So it's
into the villages.
It's intended to harm civilians as much as
It's
possible.
intended to harm civilians as much as possible. Okay. So they will fire a fierce attack, a fire attack, and then move in to conquer different areas. This is a great challenge. A great challenge is to protect the civilians, first of all. We don't want our civilians to become refugees, so we have to protect them. We have to try and foresee this attack ahead of time. And now it becomes a certain race to how fast they can take an attack and how fast we can defend. And you know what? It forces us, no matter what, in the next war, to be on the offensive as fast, as fierce, as accurate as possible. So it puts the next war with Hezbollah into a big clash and a big challenge for the army of Hezbollah, for Lebanon, and for Israel as well in this incident.
Let's actually shift a little bit to Lebanon, because we've talked about the challenge to the civilian population of Israel. But what, as you all know, what Hezbollah has done since 2006 especially, but even leading up to 2006, is that it has built its military infrastructure in the built-up civilian areas basically maps of villages of South Lebanon and even further up when they got after the 2006 war, when they were required to push up even further to set up infrastructure north of the Litani River. They have also turned the civilian population there into essentially military targets. So if you can paint to the just as grim a picture, perhaps, or perhaps even more. I mean, to quote Yair Golan, who was then the head of the Northern Command of the IDF, said that he doesn't look unfavorably towards asymmetric warfare with a group like Hezbollah. He says he actually sees that as an advantage, that it behooves Israel to demonstrate this asymmetry that exists between it and Hezbollah in the most muscular muscular fashion possible. Could you explain, so just as you had been, about how that might look on the Israeli side, what exactly it might look on the Lebanese side?
Okay, so Hezbollah in 2006 had a technique. The technique was to be in the open areas, use these open areas, dig holes, put the rockets in, and fire them on a timer or on a remote. But most of the military or most of their abilities came on the open area. It was a failure from their point of view. And what they did is they moved all their forces, all their military infrastructure into the different villages. So if you go to the northern border today and you look, you and I will see a different picture. You will see a picture of houses and red roofs and things like that. I will see a house where there's a living room, there's a child's room, there's a kitchen, there's a rocket room. That's what I'll see there. And these rockets are there. The infrastructure is there. Everything is dug, everything is ready. For the day of the order, they are ready. The way that they conduct it is that the people that live in the village are the ones who will be the operatives in the next war. So they don't need to run around. They're there all the time.
Right.
And today, the Syrian theater is giving them a great theater of practicing all what they want. They don't really care. It's like a paradise for militaries. You know, you go, you shoot wherever you want, whatever you want to do. You come back, you alter the things, you get them better, and that's what they're doing. But they haven't stopped. You might ask, you know, how come if Hezbollah is in Syria, how does it have enough time and money to get ready for the next war? They haven't stopped. Since 2006, they are getting ready for the next fight. Right. You must understand that Hezbollah does not stand alone. Hezbollah is a front outpost of Iran.
Right.
And they serve Iran's interest in the area. Okay. Hezbollah is in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Sudan, right. All over the place. Right. Hezbollah is there, meaning Iran is there, right. Trying to influence. And that is something one must understand on what's going on.
Do you think that because of their infrastructure being in civilian areas, do you think that in the case of another war that there would be international pressure on Israel to not conduct its operations in the manner that it sees most fitting to be able to defeat such a threat that emanates from this type of theater?
Look, it's obvious that what Hezbollah is trying to do is what all our enemies are trying to do. You know, we put the sanctity of life number one.
Right.
We build rockets and missiles to pinpoint out a window and a terrorist that we see and identify, and we put in millions just to get the right equipment so we know who's a combatant and who's not a combatant. They do the opposite. They know our vulnerability. They know our weakness. And they know the weakness of the international actors. So they move everything into the villages, and they will use the people as human shields. Right. They are planning not to let the villagers flee the villages and go up north.
Oh, interesting.
They are planning to not allow them, to keep them in captivity in the villages. They want the civilians to be killed. It's a tool in their game. That's what they do.
Okay.
But there is no doubt that the next war, I can tell you that since 2006, we have about 500% more targets than what we had in 2006. And I can tell you that the next war in Lebanon will be a fierce one. We will hit and pinpoint out every one, but we will have to do it fast, and we will have to maneuver as fast and as deep as possible as we can, because these rockets can make a lot of damage. If a rocket is fired at a ship coming into Israel, I don't know if you know, but 96% of Israel merchandise and ability to exist come through the sea. So if a rocket hits a ship, by the way, in 2006, there was a civilian ship drowned by a Lebanese Hezbollah rocket. Okay? Lloyd's, which is the only insurance agency enabling these ships to come, will rise, and ships won't come into Israel.
Right.
And this will prevent Israel from conducting the war for time. So these are challenges which we are confronting.
Does this affect the prioritization, let's say, with all the missile defense that we hear about that Israel is developing? Does this affect the prioritization of where the IDF thinks, the strategic outpost that it should protect? So.
Look, there is no doubt that protecting from missiles such as the Iron Dome is a strategic tool. It enables our leaders to have more time to make decisions, more accurate decisions. But this Iron Dome won't be relevant in the next war. Well, it will be relevant into the strategic parts.
Okay.
It won't be relevant to protect the whole of the state of Israel.
Sure.
If in Operation Protective Edge, 5,000 rockets were fired in 51 days. 5,000 rockets sounds a lot in 51 days. We are foreseeing the next war with Hezbollah in 2 days, 5,000 rockets. So that's what we foresee in the next war. Now, the Iron Dome won't be good enough to protect that. We'll have to decide where we put it and where we don't. We'll have to maybe receive or make as much possible to receive more Iron Domes to protect the different strategical parts. And from that point of view, we'll have to maneuver as fast as possible to finish that as fast as possible.
So you've spoken about Hezbollah gaining experience in combat in Syria. But another thing that it's actually doing in Syria is that it is exploring the merging of the Golan Heights with the southern Lebanese front. So for the first time now, since really 1973, is that in the future, in an upcoming conflict, the Golan will actually be possibly an open, active front. So the war, as you mentioned earlier, is when we talk about the north is no longer Lebanon, the north is Lebanon and Syria. Can you explain what kind of infrastructure there is or there is planned to be in place in the Golan for Hezbollah and the IRGC, and how that factors into your planning as well?
Well, Hezbollah is using the Golan Heights and the Syrian border. Well, there is no Syria today.
Sure.
Okay, it's a different kind. We can't speak of Syria as Syria. But Hezbollah is trying to actually make one front. Hezbollah is trying to use this Syrian front to a Lebanese front and connect the two. For instance, if published by foreign media, Israel had shot down Samir Kuntal, Hezbollah had retaliated in Lebanon.
Right.
So you ask, how come? How come this was in Syria what is their interest in Lebanon? They're trying to create an equation, a deterrence equation, where the Syrian front is part of that deterrence equation. Hezbollah wants this Syrian border with Israel to use it as a twilight zone, to use it as the ability to attack Israel, and then again, not to take responsibility, and if they are attacked in Syria, to immediately connect it to Lebanon. You must understand that what is this war in Syria? Why are Hezbollah actually in Syria? You must understand that Syria is the lifeline from Iran to Hezbollah. It's the only airline that they have, and they are fighting there for their lives. It's not just a fight in Syria. It's not only about infrastructure. That's an opportunity. They're fighting for their life with the connection with Iran and their ability to influence and have Iran having a front, an immediate front with Israel. That's the whole idea. So Hezbollah is deepening its infrastructure in Syria, is deepening its abilities, its operational abilities in Syria, so that they can make that connection.
Yeah. It's now you understand, I guess, why, as Israeli officials now start talking about Israeli red lines in Syria, they talk about the transfer of strategic weapons, obviously across the border, which we all know, but they also start talking about now how sort of an enhanced or Iranian position in Syria is also part of Israel's red lines, because all of a sudden you see that it means consolidating Hezbollah's ability to continue to conduct war against the state of Israel. So we've described the various theaters, and we've described how things might look in a future war. I know this is a kind of a tricky question, but how do you think, given Hezbollah's involvement in Syria and preoccupation in Syria, what in your mind triggers this, or possibilities for such a war to erupt?
Well, both sides at the moment don't want a war. And the understanding is that although both sides don't want a war, maybe the proximity of having a war is probably immediate at any given moment. So let's say if we take January 2014, where there was an attack on a convoy when the son of Mornia and the Iranian general lost their lives there, and we had missiles, about 9 anti-tank missiles fired at a military convoy and killing 2 soldiers. Hezbollah was planning to kill 10, 15 soldiers. So let's just imagine that we had 10 soldiers killed and 2 civilians killed. And Israel will retaliate to that. So Hezbollah will be ready when they go out to do such an attack. They are ready for a war. So in January 2014, we were close to a war. Nobody really knows that, but we were close to a war because by luck, we had only 2 soldiers killed. Each one is Olam Umlo, is a whole world, but we had only 2 soldiers killed. And the retaliation was a small retaliation. But Hezbollah thought that they managed to kill 10, 15 soldiers. And they were ready for a war because they were ready for a broader retaliation by Israel. Right. This can happen at every given moment because Hezbollah is on the go to make more infrastructure, to bring in more weapons, and Israel will not accept that. So it's a very delicate situation.
Very dangerous time at a border that is really a powder keg and could erupt. And thank you so much for helping us understand the grim but the seriousness of the situation. And it was a privilege speaking with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.